Hello, everyone. Just a quick heads up. We've got some great bonus content available this month on What a Hell of a Way to Die. And if you sign up at the $5 tier, you get access to everything we have put out bonus content-wise since we started the show in 2016. The link is in the show notes. And otherwise, please enjoy this episode.
Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. He ain't gonna jump no more.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. It is me, it is Nate, and special guest Cynthia, who is also, for some reason, married to Nate. Who knows why? Our wives are with us, but we have one of them here. And Cynthia, specifically, we brought you on because I need, as an American who's not in England, and as two Americans who are in England, we need some help with this royal story. So Cynthia, first off, it's been a while. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Just been sitting here at home for a year.
as we all have, just sitting.
As the people who are with sense have been doing, sitting at home for a year.
How is the vaccination in England?
Let's not talk about that today.
I was going to say that's a sore subject. Thanks to my asthma, I should be getting vaccinated, but I'm not. So I'm going to be home for a few more months. I'm going to be in this last group here in England. So I keep seeing all of you people posting your vaccination things. I'm very happy for you, but also very jealous.
I'll make sure to throw some vials of Johnson & Johnson in the care package I send out to you guys.
Thank you.
I'm sure you just inject it into you, you'll be fine. But we're here to talk the Royals. And I am not. I know, Nate. I know Trash Future is probably going to go real in depth with it, but I kind of wanted to have something that's more from, I don't know, the perspective of Americans kind of looking in. So it's.
I would just start off by saying I don't know if we are, because I feel like the story is more. I don't really think it's the thing that makes the story so profound, in my opinion, is more that it's just it's an opportunity for the outside world to see how toxic and vile the British media is. Obviously, the royal family is part of that in the sense of them being just a bunch of inbred freaks cosplaying as their ancestors with no real power, but the ability to just be horrible to each other and get paid billions of dollars in taxpayer funds to do basically nothing. But I also think that their ability to ruin people's lives would not be as great if not for a completely pliant, venal British media establishment that is basically made up, especially at the editorial level, of people who might as well be royals in terms of their class composition.
I would also add, I think, between the Trash Future co-host and you guys, I might be the only person who has actually watched royal stuff since I was a kid. So I actually watch things with Diana and Fergie. Diana is fairly popular in the Black community because she actually talked to Black people, which it's not a thing the royals are necessarily very good at.
They apparently don't like doing it now.
I was gonna say, although Charles did go and do his little photo op at the Black church, so they're very they're good when it's important. But we remember the photo of William being I can't remember what country he was in, but he's just he's on some sort of thing and being carried by a bunch of Black men. And I always just think of that when I think of the royals and Black people, whereas Diana would be kissing AIDS patients and things. So there's a certain amount of reverence and for her, because she just came across as more personable than the rest of them.
Diana certainly had her problems, but
yes.
Also she was the only royal that seemed to be hey, all that charity shit that we keep saying we do, we should do that, rather than just be here's money into the weird slush funds and money laundering schemes that we have in the Seychelles. She actually went out and did stuff.
She was less stuffy about it. You actually saw her talking to people, touching people, doing stuff.
And you also got to remember that Diana being more human was also rounded out by the fact that, not only was she less awkward than the rest of them, but the rest of them also have invariably, when they make public appearances, have said and done horrible things. They're Prince Philip is notoriously racist. He also, I remember seeing a video of him basically at a thing like a meet and greet with students, and one boy that he was talking, he asked him what he wanted to do when he grew up, and he said he wanted to be an astronaut. And Prince Philip looked at this, 8 or 9 year old boy, was like, I think you'll have to lose some weight if you want to do that, sonny. Just a horrible fucking person. And Like
He's Trump talking to that kid about Santa Claus.
Yeah. By 7, that's kind of marginal, isn't it? Right? Yeah, Santa Claus. More and more folks are saying Santa Claus, not real, folks. These kids, what's wrong with them? Like, it's just. Yeah, so effectively, Diana seemed human both because I think that she had a kind of like in my opinion, people kind of recognized that vulnerability that she in the situation she was in, but also compared to the rest of them, she didn't seem as though, in her internal monologue, she was calling for like the fucking guards to behead everybody who looked at her funny. You know what I mean? Like she seemed like a human being.
She had charisma, and I also think the last season of The Crown, which deals with Diana, did, portrayed this well, and that when she was in front of the camera and when she was talking to people, it seemed more natural and less, it didn't always seem like, yes, I need to interact with my subjects and look like a normal person right now. She just, could talk to people.
And the normal people seem to come from outside of the family. Like Meghan Markle, obviously she's a quote Hollywood elite, but also she's not a royal. She's not a part of all this nonsense.
Cynthia could probably speak a little bit to Meghan Markle's background, I think. But I think the big thing here is Diana came from like an aristocratic family in the United Kingdom that had a ton of money. So like, although she was more personable, she was still like from that class. Whereas from what I understand of Meghan Markle, she's not. And obviously Americans, we have our sort of aristocracy with regard to people with money, but it's just such a newer thing. It's not formally granted titles. I mean, like, if you're a DuPont or if you're a Kennedy or if you're a Carnegie, like, yes, you are royalty basically, but it's not, there isn't like a formal code of how commoners are supposed to behave around you.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously Meghan Markle being an actress, she's used to talking to the press and also like talking to fans and like being personable. So there's a certain amount of like, the British press always wants to argue that she's acting. And it's like, no, a big part of being an actor is also learning to speak to people, as yourself. Yeah. It's called interviews and press junkets and Comic-Cons and all those things that actors do where they interact with people and seem personable and nice.
And let me just throw this in there too before you follow up, Francis. Another thing too is contrast Meghan Markle and her ability to be on camera with the last high-profile royal appearance on camera, which was Prince Andrew basically saying that he can't sweat, so there's no way he could have been the person accused in sex trafficking crimes with Jeffrey Epstein because actually somehow he lost the ability to sweat in the Falkland Islands War. Like, so unbelievably, like, emperor has no clothes level of just lack of ability to understand the world around him, never having basically escaped the enormous gilded apron of his mother. Like the extent to which he is so uncharismatic and in my opinion, similar to the rest of the royal family, puts a situation like Meghan Markle where unless you are, unless you are predisposed towards aggressively wanting to defend the institution at all costs, if you are an outsider, there's very little way to come into the situation to just sort of do a frank assessment of the people involved and not come to the conclusion that the people in the royal family are insane. Like they're just weird slug people that learned English from a parrot that learned English in the 1600s. Like it's just a weird fucking unbelievable lack of charisma and lack of connection.
I also think when it comes to Meghan Markle, people forget that in addition to being an actress, she also had like a lifestyle fashion blog, which was really popular. So if she'd not married Harry, she'd probably be out there like, with a very, very lucrative, sort of goop-like thing, but without the complete crazy and trying to sell you.
You described it as like unproblematic goop.
Yeah, I basically like imagine you getting, advice, but the person giving it to you isn't pretending to have invented yoga and tell you to put, jade eggs up, your vagina. So instead you're just getting fashion advice and like stuff from like a very normal person who is just, like talking to you and feeling very relatable. Like her, lifestyle blog was actually like good. So, she had literally 2 different careers going on before this, used to being in the press, used to being all these things. So of course she's good at, public things.
Meghan's got her own money, which like is such a great, like, that she's coming into that relationship because she wants to be there, because she's into whatever Harry's selling there.
Look, those two really, really love each other. Like that is like the one thing when you see them together, they are absolutely completely into each other, like 100%.
Okay. And Cynthia, since you follow the royals more, maybe you can answer this question. Maybe I'm anthropomorphizing royals a little too much because they are just, sentient blocks of wood in general. But it seems like Harry just really doesn't want anything. Like he was born into it. He realizes that that he's got no sway in anything. He's not going to be in power unless some like massively fucked up stuff happens. Even if he does, he's no longer in the line. Like, now it's like, okay, there's dad, and then there's my brother, and then there's my brother's kids. I have no stake in this anymore. I'm just going to go do my own thing.
He was always portrayed as like, the more bad boy. If you remember, he went to Vegas and like somebody released the naked photos of him in the hotel room. I mean, and
also swastika armband.
I hadn't gotten to that one, but I was going to get there. But before that, even the woman he dated for a long time, Chelsea Davy, like I remember, I think it was GQ, it might have been Men's Health, but somebody wrote an article years ago about how they liked Harry more than, William, because Harry seemed, because Chelsea Davy seemed like the kind of girl who would leave underwear in your couch, whereas like Kate Middleton was too buttoned up. So Harry, I think, has always appealed more, like to some ways to Americans, but also like he's been sort of sold, in that sort of way. And like the Nazi uniform thing, yes. Like, when some of this stuff comes up about like, the royal family being racist, and I actually listened to the entire Oprah interview, like a part of me was listening to it and I just wanted to be like, Meghan, you married a man who showed up to a Nazi uniform at a Halloween party for fun. And there's a photo of him standing next to somebody in blackface. Like, come on, girl, you were marrying into some racism. You had to know. I mean, he's white, so that's going to be true to begin with. But
I mean, I was throwing it in there that Cynthia is in a way a subject matter expert because like Meghan Markle, she also married a dumbass who has red hair and was born in 1984 and joined the army and deployed to Afghanistan. And so as a result, she can perhaps speak to the unique psychology involved in having a relationship with somebody slightly younger than you who's a complete idiot and also has red hair. And so I feel as though the one thing that I've noticed with Prince Harry was and you can see this from the coverage of him throughout the years, has a ton of contempt for the British media. And I think having seen that continually get worse, obviously like the big seminal moment of this is the coverage of his mother and then the way his mother died. But then subsequently, the stuff involved with him pre-military, post-military, and then I think he was involved with the founding of the Invictus Games, which is I believe a sports competition for injured and disabled veterans.
Yeah, it's kind of Special Olympics-y, but for people who have been, yes, you're right.
That's a thing that he cares about, and that's a thing that he's been involved in. And obviously, like you and I are also involved in veteran space, but decidedly not in an apolitical way. But seems like
we all have a pre-woke period. is what we're getting to here.
Yes.
Look, all white people have a pre-woke period, in my opinion. It's just for some white people, if you're Harry, your pre-woke period is very, very, very public. But and
there, I really wish that I could have been there for the conversation of when like Harry and Meghan are really kind of starting to hit it off, and Meghan has to do the like, okay, we got to talk about some shit though, because if I'm coming into this, you understand, like I understand how you are, and you're the one I like. Like, it's hard to. We all have a pre-woke we all have a pre-woke period, but like Nate and I have never, at least I don't think Nate has. I know that I haven't, but we've never been, in blackface with Nazi armbands on. So
yeah, you as I said, they're I don't know. I mean, I assume it came up in conversation. But one of the things interesting about the interview with Oprah was she mentioned that she's never Googled Harry, that she didn't know who he was. She had no idea about the royal family. And, when they started dating, everything was like the stuff that he told her. So she really went into this incredibly naive. And like when they first started dating, I thought it was odd, like some of her behavior. And now I get it. And that I assumed that she knew more than she obviously did. And I mean, I think obviously for lots of Americans, it's very easy to not know anything about the royal family. I personally, if I were going to date a royal, would have done a little bit more research. I don't think it's a matter of like Googling Harry to find out every person he's had sex with and every dumb thing he's done in his life, but instead just getting a better sense of this sort of institution. And I feel like she's treated, it sounds like from the Oprah interview, she treated it as I'm marrying into this family. And, they love Harry and I love him and we get along and things are going well and not really enough focus on the institution. And like one of the things she says over and over in that interview was that she was expecting them to protect me. And basically all I could think was, girl, you basically thought HR was going to protect you. that has never worked out for Black women in any job ever.
Yeah. You're
Ever.
the best you can hope for is a pizza party right now. And
Yeah.
like even that, the pizza's gonna suck. They're gonna get it from Papa John's, the guy who needed 20 months to get the N-word out of his
We
system.
do have Papa John's here in London, sadly. So,
Yeah. And it's just as bad. That's the thing. It smells just as bad here as it does in the U.S. And it smells the same as it does in the U.S. I've made the comment that it's very unnerving to me in summer to be riding my bike on Tower Bridge Road to come to the studio. And it literally, I'm like, I get this whiff of the same fucking pizza joint that I used to go to in Westfield, Indiana in like 1997. So as a side note, that does exist. I wanted to point this out, though. I feel like that naivety, I feel as though there's a lot of stuff in there that if you had Googled, I mean, I get the understanding of like you meet this person, you want to be with them, like you don't really care about the other stuff, but obviously like this is such a the rabbit hole
treated
goes
it like
so
she
deep.
and she admits this. She treated it like she was dating another celebrity. I imagine as a celebrity, like you don't want to Google stories about the celebrity you're dating because you're just going to end up on Perez Hilton or something and read a bunch of stuff that's like mostly crap and really not useful information. And so I absolutely get that habit, but also I feel like Harry being born into this, the institution has been protecting him this entire time because like it is the responsibility to do that. And so him assuming that they would protect his wife, again, I sort of get it, but you had two people who had very, very different expectations than what actually happened. And, Harry has always, more so than his brother, worn on his sleeve how absolutely angry he is about what happened to his mother. Which isn't to say I don't think William is angry, but William is going to be, king, and so thus, not really allowed to have emotion in the same sort of way. Whereas if you bring it up, Harry basically looks like he would just murder the British press if he could.
I mean,
so
I'll give you an example.
You killed my
though,
mother, and I would kill you if I could, but I'll be as nice
the,
as I can.
Some of the things that Meghan was walking into. When she was being introduced to the extended family at a luncheon in 2017, Princess Michael of Kent. Yeah, so it's a strange usage of the name, but her name is Michael. Showed up wearing a brooch on her suit jacket that was basically a gollywog. I mean, it was basically, it looked like Varta Pete.
And her response after was just like, oh, I mean, it's just a brooch that I had. Like, of course I would wear it. And I remember thinking, did she literally go in her brooch thing and be like, which one would the darkie like? Ooh, this one.
I'm sorry, I dug through the story and this makes me laugh. Francis, how much do you know about the British royal family and its call it ethnic origins?
I mean, look, it's culminated in a ginger and a guy who also, how old is William? Like maybe in his 40s?
He's my brother's age. He's 38.
He's 38. He looks like he's dying.
Look, going bald.
Honestly,
William
he looks
had the worst glow up in that, like, remember there was a phase and everyone thought he was really hot, and as soon as he went bald, it was just like, wow, he does.
It was like, like he hit 18 and 19 and he was young and hot, and his little brother was coming up behind him. They're all young and hot, and then like it's like his head, like parts of his head, of William's head, never stopped growing. Like his teeth keep getting bigger. His head, like the cranium, like he's getting hydrocephalus as we look at him. Like everything is just, and this is the things, like the genetic lottery of like he's the next in line, and he has to be because he looks like a golem created out of like they went down to the banks of England somewhere and just found like the shittiest mud they could, and they're like, this is a royal family. And then you've got Harry, who we all make fun of gingers without souls, but Harry's good looking, he's normal, he seems normal at least, and he just wants to get the fuck out of it. So now going anything before that, I don't know.
Here's the thing that I'm going to read you two paragraphs from this BBC story about Princess Michael and the racist brooch. And let's start out by saying the BBC refused to call it racist. They put racist in scare quotes. This is her biography in this article. Princess Michael of Kent was born Baroness Marie Christine von Reibnitz in 1945 in the German-populated Sudetenland, now sitting in the Czech Republic. She was born shortly before the end of World War II, in which her father served as a major in the Nazi SS.
Look, I want to read you something from a Guardian piece about this same incident. Now, the princess has been accused of racism before. In 2004, she reportedly instructed African-American customers in a New York restaurant to go back to the colonies in an argument about noise. The princess, whose father was an SS officer, denied the incident a few months later in an interview with ITV, saying, "I even pretended years ago to be African, a half-caste African, but because of my light eyes, I did not get away with it, but I dyed my hair black."
She tried to do black like me, but racistly.
Yes.
Yes.
And I also love that it's just like, apparently there are no black people in this entire world with light eyes. Like, you know, who's going to tell all the black people on TikTok with light eyes who post about it nonstop that
Also,
they don't exist?
How dumb do you have to be in New York and then tell somebody to go back to the colonies? You're in the colonies. We took them from you. Fuck off.
It's
No,
Go
like,
back
man,
to your racism.
She was
island.
talking about the colonies in Namibia, the one that the Nazis
No,
took over.
I know, but you're in, like, you're not in your England where you can tell
She's
people.
not even
I mean, you
English.
shouldn't tell people.
She's
yeah.
German. She's a Nazi.
What?
yeah, I also want to read you a quote that she said. "I had this adventure with these absolutely adorable special people, and to call me racist, it's a knife through the heart because I really love these people." Yes.
I suppose it sounds more affectionate in the original German.
So yeah,
Es war wie ein Messer in mein Herz. Sorry, I'm speaking German in Nazi intonation.
as someone who has gone through the experience of meeting the racist relatives, I will preface
In a
this by
German-speaking
saying,
country, for that matter.
yes. So I dated someone who was Swiss, and you know,
Famously not racist country.
Are you guys the royal family? Is this what I'm missing here? Like, you guys are basically Harry and
Well, she's not
Meghan,
talking about my
just with-
family. She's talking about her ex's family
okay.
in Switzerland.
yeah. But I will tell the story very quickly. But yes, so it was just like this was when Obama was running for president, and so my ex's cousin came over with her mother. I might have even been her grandmother, but I'm pretty sure it was her mother. They came over, and her mother is someone that my ex's family did not like. Her nickname was Difficult Auntie, but in Swiss German. And, you know, I was warned ahead of time this woman was incredibly difficult and all that stuff. And she comes over. And I think the thing is, because, you know, it was like he has an American girlfriend, everyone's expectation was that, like, I was going to be like an American Barbie kind of person. So I think her expectation was like she was going to walk in and see some like California blonde. And instead it was me. And she was seated next to me. She proceeded to spend the rest of the afternoon not really talking. She did not make eye contact with me. She did not say anything. I talked to her daughter about Obama, all this other stuff. And then she left. And my ex's family just thought it was hilarious. They're like, wow, she really hates you. And, you know, my ex's dad hated this woman. And so I jokingly offered to always answer the door when she came over because then maybe she would leave faster. And so it was, you know, a joking thing. I will say, though, that later on, my ex's father died at the funeral. The same woman came up and, like, you know, shook my hand and did all of those things. And so, like, she sort of got over sort of her initial, like, oh my God, like, there's a black person there. So I think that's also a thing that's really important to remember when you go through these incidences with the racist relatives. People often think, like, oh, you know, like, this happens and, like, they're going to talk to you. It's like, no, a lot of these people will talk to you, but that does not mean that the first time you meet them, they aren't, like, super awkward and weird. And so I bet Princess Michael just thought, like, yeah, I'm going to put this little darky pin on here and we're just going to bond and, like, hang out. And the next time Megan had to meet her, she probably just went up to her like, "Oh, we're just really great friends, aren't we?" You know. So
it is kind of a, like, you know, did you wear it because you wanted to offend Megan, or did you wear it because you're just like, look, it's like you, right?
I really
It's
think
like
it's
you.
that, based upon her comments of like, I really like these people, that she honestly looked through her brooches and thought, which one is gonna, you know, is really gonna let me bond with Megan, and that was her choice.
I got all these jars of jam that you should take a look at. They're all empty, but with Megan, with your help, we can get the gollywog back on the jam jars.
Yes.
Damn, Francis. See, this is the thing. You become a fan of Trash Truth, you start to pick up on some of the deep cuts about Britain. but yeah, I think also the thing that's been striking me about this is, you know, obviously some of the criticism that was, you know, that came forth from this interview was talking about, for example, unnamed members of the royal family, and we can guess at who those might have been. Basically fretting about whether or not Harry and Meghan's child, their first son Archie was born, I think 2 or so years ago, or a year and a half ago, would be dark skinned or not. And like the implication that I took out of it was they were concerned that he might have dark skin.
I mean, I'll say two things. One, I think, you know, there's this thing that people do when, you know, you're in an interracial relationship where they come over and they sort of muse about like what your kid's going to look like.
Yes. This has happened to me and Cynthia And this happened to me in private with people who knew both of us.
Yeah, I mean, if Nate and I ever have a child, I will tell you all that I am not going to announce it publicly, and there will be no public photos, because the second anyone makes any comment like this to me, I promise you, like, I will, like, there will be murder in my eyes. Like, there's no being nice about this. But there is that sort of habit, and like there are, you know, it's interesting because the British press is just basically like, we talk about like this all the time, and like Black parents ask about this too, and it's like, yeah, there's a lot of doing this. And, you know, like it's related to racism, it's related to colorism, it's related to all those things. But it's absolutely, yes. Having watched the interview, you absolutely feel like, and it sounds like it was discussed with Harry, not with Meghan. And so the idea that someone's going to go up to Harry and basically be like, you worried your kid's going to be dark? It's like, what if your child won't burn every time it goes into the sun?
Right. There's my, like, if you two had a kid, like, oh, wouldn't it be great if you had a child that didn't, you know,
fucking evaporate? Do you know how bad my sunburns are? I still have scars from getting sunburned when I was like 10 years old.
You mean I can go to the beach with a member of this family and 10 minutes in, I'm ready to go. The sun's trying to murder me.
As Nate is like a Victorian in a 3-piece suit at the beach, sitting in a wicker chair because he just can't let the sun kiss his skin.
Look, man, I'm telling you, I actually can tan, so I'm better than most redheads. But yes, maybe I've told this story before in the podcast. Maybe I haven't. You know, dad mode, proto dad mode. My memory is not great on these things. But I went to a friend's birthday party when I was 10, when I lived in New Mexico. And just bear in mind, Santa Fe is at like 7,000-ish feet base elevation. So obviously, like the sun is quite intense in the summertime, and you can get a really bad sunburn if you have a light skin. Didn't wear sunscreen. I was at this pool party for like 6 hours, and my skin started hurting that night. And within 2 days, it was like fucking Chernobyl victim. Like I was basically, blisters were forming and then popping within the span of like 10 minutes. And it was just like this horrible fucking skin destruction leakage. And I still have moles that I have to get checked out by the doctor every year that formed from that. And that was one fucking time. So if we have a kid and they don't burn like that, I'll be happy. I'll be really happy. But the thing about it is that, for instance, I say this, and for our listeners as well, and this is something that I've learned both from observation, but also from having a wife and partner who has explained shit to me that she shouldn't have to explain, but that, like, obviously, you know, it's not self-explanatory all the time, is that like there's no fucking way of knowing if you are in a mixed race relationship and you have a kid. There's no way of predicting. There's no way of knowing. Some people have kids that are lighter. People have kids who are darker. Genuinely, you have no fucking way of knowing. So the idea of people being like, oh, I think I know what your kid's going to look like. No, you fucking don't. You have no idea, because even the parents don't know.
Well, it's also like when people, you know, like people will sometimes ask me, do you think your kids will have red hair or have blue eyes? And it's like, you get the kid you get. This isn't Gattaca. You don't go up and like just make an order and get your child. In the case of my family, my oldest sister is paler than either of her parents. She's lighter than my mother, and she's lighter than our dad. She's as light as my grandmother. Whereas I have very similar coloring and look basically just like my mother. And my middle sister is very, very dark, you know, and very, much, much closer to my father's skin tone. And you know what? So my mom didn't, you know, basically got the entire like gamut, but she didn't get to go pick and say, well, I would like one of each, you know, just to kind of see how it's going to go. It's like you get what you get. And in my family, like we have people who are like darker skin, we have people who are lighter skin, and you cannot tell always. You know, when I was growing up as a kid, people would look at my older sister and just say like, she can't be your sister. And it's like, well, I'm sorry, but genetically she is. So,
Cynthia,
you know, it is what it is.
We can cut the question here, but I don't know if you want to talk about it. But like, since I don't know, we've never talked about colorism on this podcast. Do you want to talk about like some of that experience of how that like changes people's relationships?
I mean, I think for me growing up as a kid, I realized that colorism was a thing because of my sister being so much darker. And like, I would definitely be treated differently if I was with her than if I was with my sister who was lighter. Because like, obviously, you know, there have been situations where people look at my mom and ask her questions like, you know, where did you get that tan? And then they would see my sister and be like, oh, wow, we realized that you guys are actually Black. And so those are the kind of experiences I had growing up as a child. And so I really got to sort of intuitively understand what colorism was, because like I am very light skinned. Like there's so many experiences in my life that would be very different if I wasn't. I'm the kind of Black person that makes white people comfortable because they're like, oh, she's not too dark. My features are very similar to my mother's, which are very similar to my European grandmother, because my grandmother is Portuguese. It makes people comfortable. In the summertime, if I go and run outside every day, like when it's marathon training, I get much darker. And like, yeah, treatment gets different than when I was like living in Wisconsin and was so pale. It was like, wow, I didn't, I didn't realize I could actually be this pale. So like, you do have those sort of experiences. I think that sometimes why people don't understand that, they don't realize even subtly how different they react. It's, if you see a black man walking behind you who's super dark skinned versus what is super light skinned, y'all are going to behave differently. White women feel a lot more fear the darker you are. When I think about some of my experiences here in the UK, I had a job where there were I was the first black person to work there, but there were two other black women who started working there. One of them was a similar skin tone to me, and one of them was much darker. And the one who was much darker absolutely experienced more racism at work than I did. I spent a lot of time attempting to protect her from that. But like, for example, I was asked to check over her work because it's like, well, dark-skinned black woman can't possibly be good at her job.
And I feel like the context there, without giving away like the specifics of the job, she basically, her Cynthia's coworker was a native English speaker who's, I believe she was either born in Nigeria, she was born in the UK.
She was born in Nigeria, a native English speaker, absolutely like perfect, impeccable English.
Educated in the UK, and she was basically being accused of being a bad writer by a native Spanish speaker who's from Spain, whose English was terrible. And Cynthia can tell the story about proofreading her work, but like,
oh yeah, I used to proofread. They would do collaborative stuff, and all of my changes were on the stuff written by her boss, who was the native English speaker, unsurprisingly. But they would consistently give her projects to do and not give her the resources necessary to complete them, and then be upset with her. But also, like, yeah, her work had to be checked. And when I left, they basically had her work checked by someone white. So I don't think she would have gone through that if she weren't as dark-skinned. Also, that same person who was her manager would make lots of disparaging comments about black women. Like one time, she came into work talking about, oh, my friend gave birth. And like, it was really exciting. I got to meet her baby this weekend. And her boss sat there and told her, oh, black women don't feel pain giving birth. Like, that must be so great. It's because you guys all have wide hips. And it's like, we die in childbirth more than anyone else, including here in the UK. Like, what the fuck?
Break out the calipers for your cervix
These were
here?
mostly Spanish people. And bro, I'm telling you, fucking old school European racism shit is off the charts. Like, it's just
yeah. I mean, I live in a very mixed neighborhood, and definitely there's racism here. But like, everybody lives together in the same neighborhood. Everybody's at least friendly enough to each other. It's not some like Eastern European bloc where everybody is like very Slavic and white, and as soon as anybody like 2 shades darker than pale comes in, everybody's really confused and angry and rejecting of that kind of thing.
On that point, Megan's not even that dark. As someone on Twitter pointed out, she basically has the complexion of an Italian. Like,
I wanted to bring that up too, because it also seems like Megan, like, first off, somebody had to tell me that she was black, because I would look at pictures of her and say, okay, she looks like a darker skinned white lady. She's got straight hair. She's got, kind of light colored eyes, and she has darker skin. But I assume everybody in Hollywood tan, so that's kind of what I figured. And somebody's like, no, she's biracial.
If you look at pictures of her as a child, you can see. So I think there's also aspects of that of like being an actress, that like being racially ambiguous is beneficial to your career. For example, if you think about love interest stories, like Hitch is a good example. Will Smith's love interest is I can't think of her name, the woman married to Ryan Gosling, Eva something. It'll come to me. Eva Mendes. He's casting as her because like he wasn't allowed to have a black love interest. Or you think of when they made the Pelican Brief, where they cast Denzel Washington and Julia Roberts, and their characters in the book end up together. And in the movie, it's very, very subtly suggested, but like part of it was like they weren't allowed to kiss on screen. They weren't allowed to do any of that stuff because like you can't have those sorts of things.
And that was in the fucking 90s. Like this isn't like the 1960s decency codes. Like, this is in the 1990s.
Well, and even if you look at how love interests are paired on shows, you'll notice that even if you do have a pairing of like a black couple, the woman is almost always light skinned. Like she will almost always be lighter. Seeing an actress like, for example, Viola Davis be in roles where she's allowed to be a love interest is incredibly revolutionary. Like, she's older, but she's a dark skinned black woman, and someone is just suggesting that yes, she is both beautiful, should be loved, and can do sex scenes. It's like, no, if you see all that stuff, it's almost always going to be someone who looks like Megan Murray, who's going to be racially ambiguous. It's like one of the lines that like white men always used to tell me when they decided they found me attractive was they'd always say like, I don't really find black women attractive, but you are. Or they'd be like, I don't really find black women attractive, but I find you and Holly Berry attractive. And it's like, well, I mean, like, honestly, being included on the attractive scale with Holly fucking Berry is pretty insane. But it's like, if your barometer for that is like, well, if you're a black woman and I should, and you know, my mediocre ass should want to fuck you, you have to look like Holly Berry. Like, sir, what?
Yeah, that's I like all kinds of music except for hip hop and country. Like, so you don't, and that's fine, but also you need to understand that what you're saying is really
right. Like, you could also tell me you find me attractive without listing off like the one other black woman in the world that, you know, like makes your dick get hard.
Or Cynthia, you're a married woman. There's no reason for me to be talking about how
this was
attractive
before I
I
was
find
married.
you.
Like, you know,
Oh, okay.
right now they probably wouldn't say Holly Berry. They'd probably pick someone else. They'd probably say like Meghan Markle. So like, this is very, but it was a very common thing to say, to just sort of coach it in like, you're the first one, or, you know, you and
exactly.
Holly
It's
Berry.
like, oh, you know, like I keep my expectations totally within reason. It's either you or Iman Abdul-Majid. Okay. Like, no,
it's like
nothing in between.
You or Beyonce, you know, and it's like, sir. So
There's nothing in between. There's Beyonce, Cynthia, and Holly Berry. Those are the only black women I find attractive.
Exactly. And like Francis and I did talk a little bit about colors, and we talked about Coming to America and the difference between the two sisters and, you know, the one who's the princess and all that other stuff. And it comes up again in the Coming to America sequel in terms of like Leslie Jones and again, the princess. So there's a recurring theme if you're watching any sort of media with black people, that like the dark-skinned black woman is usually, she's the bully or the villain or the mean one. Maybe she gets to be the friend. She gets to be all of those things. So Meghan even being in this position in a lot of ways has to do with colorism. Like, do I imagine if she were dark-skinned, this would be so much worse. So much worse.
And that's something I'd point out too, Francis, that for the benefit of our listeners, since the overwhelming majority of our listeners are in America, is that, I mean, I think if you compare and contrast the way that Kate Middleton was treated versus Meghan Markle, with regard to everything in the press, Meghan Markle was always portrayed as hostile, and all the coverage was basically implying that she was ungrateful, that she was a bully, that she was racist against white people, that, you know, she was basically a monster. And, you know, if you look at the way that the British media treats black people in general, it's almost always, you know, look at this object of derision. And invariably, like one example that comes to mind is, Cambridge professor. I think she was actually a lecturer. She may not even have been a full professor. Basically, they just took completely out of context the idea of decolonial curriculum and basically implied that she was, trying to ban old white men from Cambridge students' curriculum. And they eventually had to publish a retraction and a correction, but they did it on like the 19th page with no fanfare. Whereas when they announced this bullshit claim, they did it with like putting her picture on the front page and, you know, making her out to be a villain. And of course, she got endless amounts of hate mail and stuff like that. And you just see that pattern repeated over and over again. Like Marcus Rashford, is a young black footballer in Britain who's been very, very successful in basically changing public opinion around Tory cuts and like Tory, the way that they've been running things in the pandemic with regard to, like, you know, children who would receive nutritional assistance at free school meals, but aren't because school wasn't in session, things like that. There was another black British footballer similarly who was, I can't remember his name, but he was similarly harassed for, and I can't remember if it was Rashford or it was somebody else who was harassed for using his money to buy his parents a home. They were basically like, look at this disgusting freak spending money. Why do we pay these animals so much money? And it's like, he's not paid any more than any other star footballer is. And when, you know, if Wayne Rooney buys his mom a house, you guys are always like, oh, wow, what a great, dutiful son. Like that level of just very blatant, like literally on the same page, praising a white person for something while denigrating a black person for the exact same thing.
And some examples that come up in the Oprah interview about Meghan specifically. Meghan grabbed her baby bump. Like she did what all women who are pregnant do. You touch the growing person in your body. And like she was accused of showing off. Whereas when Kate did it, the other example is like they both were, you know, eating avocado toast. And like for Meghan, it was like, wow, she's eating healthy fats. This is great. I mean, for Kate and for Meghan, it was like, how dare you, you know, eat this food? Like, think of all the water that's spoiled. And so,
basically, avocados are second only to cocaine and being a disgusting waste, destroying the developing world. How dare you? Like, genuinely, it was at the point, given how it just unbelievably racist British media is, and unbelievably upper class. Like, there was Gary Young, who's a black British writer, who's written a ton about this, both having reported from America and in the United Kingdom, commented that if you look at columnists only, just the people who have columns in major British newspapers, the percentage of those columnists who went to private school and then to either Cambridge or Oxford is a greater proportion of the total body of columnists than members of the House of Lords. Like, put more simply, a greater percentage of British columnists are privately educated and went to Oxbridge than members of the House of Lords, like the unelected aristocratic fucking upper chamber of the British Parliament. So, like, you live in this system where it's just unbelievably upper class, full of class solidarity towards protecting each other for being awful people, and incredibly racist, incredibly hostile, and they know that they can drum up angry fucking, bloodthirsty shit from their readers. And I think that's manifest when you look at polling and stuff in Britain. If you get your primary source of news in this country from the BBC or from print media, you will be insane.
I mean, I think also, again, sort of going back to having watched this royal stuff for longer, for people who haven't, if you go back and look at the stories about Diana and also about Fergie, Andrew's ex-wife, especially when they both were, ending their marriages, these kind of like awful, headlines are fully within, but usually you don't get them when you're married to a royal. That is the biggest thing that this negative press started from the second, like when it became public that they were dating, it was a little bit before Wimbledon, because I remember eventually they showed up at Wimbledon together because Meghan Markle is friends with Serena Williams. So obviously she's going to want to go. And like Harry had to put out like a statement right away. Basically it was like, leave a girlfriend alone from like the first week. So, there are elements of this that very much feel within the palace playbook. So when, so there's that aspect of it. So that's also why I sort of look at Harry like, you should have prepared her a little bit for this, because if you, because of what happened to your mother, that the palace is not always, there to protect, but also it's 1,000 times worse because she's Black, because then you get the British press. And as Nate points out, that constant thing of like, Black people are breathing and this should just not be allowed at all. The only time Black people are allowed to breathe is if they're there to hold water for the Tories. That's it. If you're saying the Tories are doing something good, then you could be, on the news and stuff. But anything else, please just go off into your corner and sit there.
I mean, it seems like every couple of years there is I think Stormzy did the same thing where he's just like, yeah, England's really racist. And then England, a bunch of British media people was just like, if you don't like it, why don't you go back from where you belong? He's like, I'm from fucking England, man.
Right, it's like wait,
literally, you're proving my point.
Doesn't he still live in Croydon where he's from?
He's from
still
Croydon
has
and he lives
house.
there. Yeah,
it's like he never left.
Right, like, and that's and therein lies like all of the British people. It's just so knee jerk to say it's not. I mean, definitely it's racism, but it's also a part of like, how dare you criticize anything about how we are, because we are who we are because of how we've been. And like, yeah, that's the problem, dude. You guys are still stuck, giving salutes to the boys who are going to fight the fucking Jerrys in Normandy. Like, it's much like America, still stuck in this World War II era thing. And it's like
worse here than America. It's worse than America, honestly. Milo just walked in, and I'm going to crib a couple of lines from Milo because he made an observation once that I thought was great, which is that American patriotism tends to manifest itself as this is the greatest country on earth, and if you don't like it, go fuck yourself. It's perfect. It's wonderful. Anyone can make it, and if you don't, it's because you suck and you're a loser. Whereas the British equivalent of that is basically, this country fucking sucks. It's miserable. You're supposed to be miserable, and if you don't like being miserable, there's the door. And it's a very different, it's like a similar conclusion with a very, very different overall worldview.
Yes, if you really enjoy being miserable,
Oh, and let's be perfectly honest, Francis. I've talked about this before, but now that since Cynthia's on, I want to say if Cynthia can give me a compass check here, if she agrees or disagrees with me. It is my belief that British people love being miserable. Like, they genuinely love it when things suck. Like, nothing makes them happier than be like, God, it fucking sucks right now.
It's funny because growing up in New England, I feel like there are a lot of that WASPs can be like that too. That there's a certain joy in being miserable. So I think in some ways I was maybe a little bit better prepared for this than you were.
That is true. Yeah,
it is heightened. So now it's more like, oh, I feel like I understand white people doing it a little bit better. It's like, this is where you all get this from, because it's very, very, very much.
Well, there's the joke that I've made that like WASPs in New England are basically the like overstated, over-exaggerated Irish American or Italian American versions of being English and upper class. That like their mannerisms are just like they're sort of frozen in amber from how it would have been in like, I don't know, 1840 or something like that. And I mean, obviously it's been passed down to some extent with like more modern things, but those traces of it are still there in the same way that people think like, Boston dirtbag thinks that he's like more Irish than the Irish because he thinks that you're supposed to wear a flat cap and fight everyone. Whereas if you go to Ireland, it's just not the case. That's not how it is. And similarly, guy who thinks he's supposed to talk like Tony Soprano and that's how all Italians are would be very surprised if he actually goes to Italy. A plot device explored in The Sopranos.
I'm very sad that we don't have a city full of like knockoff English people. Like we've got Boston for Irish people. We've got New York for Italian people. Where's our place that's full of like people who are just like, oh, I'm gonna pop off down to the pub to get some fish and chips, and it's like absolutely nothing like what you would find.
Nashua, New Hampshire.
Yeah, I was gonna say we do fish and chips in New England. Like I remember having this conversation with Milo once that like, yes, eating fish and chips is a regular like sort of thing.
But fish and chips isn't really even British. It's fucking Portuguese.
Yes, I was gonna say we do that in Rhode Island because.
Also, fish and chips is just like fish and chips is what we get every Friday during Lent in St. Louis too. It's just like fried cod and French fries.
No, that's the thing. I think is that Portuguese. I think it was either Portuguese Jews fleeing during the Reconquista, or if it was something later on. But Portuguese people migrated to Britain because they were being persecuted at home, and they brought the tradition of fish and chips that has now become a thing here. But I mean, similarly in America, I mean, yeah, like Cynthia was saying, The one of the biggest Portuguese speaking communities in the world is in basically the Rhode Island, Boston sort of area. And yeah, that tradition is there too, but it's sort of affiliated with New England in a way that kind of eliminates in the same way that he is here. Like it's treated as like this thing that just popped up, endogenously, when in truth it's
Portuguese Jews who did this. Yes.
It is very similar. St. Louis is basically like where all the Bosnian diaspora goes. So everywhere has their little spot.
Britain's had waves and waves of immigration. I mean, like even like it kind of gets pedantic to get to the point when you talk about stuff like the Romans, but the Romans were like the people from all over the empire were in Britain when the Romans ruled Britain. Like that's true. The whole Anglo-Saxon thing, and then the fact that like the fucking the Normans invaded and took over and basically forced everybody to speak French. I mean, like that's true. There's been a lot, like I said, people from Portugal came here, Huguenots came here, like my dad's side of the family, they wound up in England because they were fleeing, I believe, France because they were Protestants. Like you look at people like the majority of the British Jewish community were people who fled from either from Germany or from the Iberian Peninsula, or from Eastern Europe. You had, in the 20th century, you had tons of Italians. I mean, like the reason you have fucking espressos in Wales is because of fucking Italian people who moved there. Like, this whole thing is the idea that this place is homogenous, and if you don't like it, you can go. Like that is obviously like that's mythology. That's flattening it.
It's just hilarious coming from a country that colonized literally everywhere. It's like, oh,
I know, right? And so in a way, like I would say, watching this whole drama unfold, I think the big takeaway, or at least the one I hope, is that people from the outside are looking at this and just being like, wow, Britain's media fucking sucks. And it's like, I've made this comparison before, but I'll make it again. It's the same sort of sense of relief for a second, the way that I felt when U.S. News decided to start covering Alaska because Sarah Palin was McCain's nominee. And I was like, yes, all this coverage showing how insane Alaska is. Like, I'm not making it up. It's not just me being a whiner. Like, it literally is this crazy. I feel like it's the same thing with British media. Like, Americans and people around the world are getting a chance to see just how. And the response, like the stuff being shared on social media from like the interviews with people, people from like the Society of Editors just basically denying that racism exists, and just some of the dumb shit people are saying, the people putting their feet in their mouths. You know what I mean? Like people are getting to see that in real time. And I don't know, maybe holding a mirror up to Britain will make some people realize like this shit's got to fucking change, but I don't know.
I mean, I agree with you. I think that it's very nice because people often, will like treat British media as if it must be smarter. It's like, just because their accents are nice and you like BBC America, that does not mean British media is good. I also
Oh
think
no, and also something that kills me too is when you go and you read like the BBC foreign correspondence coverage of American politics. You're like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like you realize how like this person was recruited because like they went to nonsing school and they have the right accent, not because they know anything about America.
But if you watch the BBC stuff in America, it's a lot of like watching Downton Abbey and TV shows, and and that can give you, because like I like the BBC when I'm in America, I don't like the BBC when I'm here. So I think that there's that aspect of it. I also think that people can have this idea that like racism is like nicer in the UK, and I hope that like this experience will point out to people that it is not, that it is in fact very, very in your face in lots of ways. It is very awful. Yes, you always have that insidious, as quote unquote casual racism. It doesn't feel casual when it's happening to you, but you also have that very in your face stuff. But I would also just say, like, to sort of sum up something, if you kind of take a little bit of a macro view of this, here you have this woman who comes in and she's like, I love Harry so much, I'm going to give up both of my careers. I'm going to literally give up my name. I'm going to not see my friends and not do all of these things to be, to be here and be the black face of the monarchy, to sort of outreach to all these colonial places that you have ravaged through slavery and all sorts of done awful things. You deport people from colonies out of this country, a la the Windrush generation. Here she was coming and saying, like, I'm going to be the PR magic for you. I'm great at this. And she was. And instead of taking her up on this offer, instead of just being nice and just saying, woohoo, we have this real nice person who's here and she's going to like do all this outreach and stuff. We've got our diversity and inclusion for the monarchy. They were like, fuck this bitch. And we are going to tank her at every way possible. And, it's interesting, it's real interesting to watch that.
If you don't believe that there's a problem, what do you need an outreach person for? Like it really feels like that the idea is just like Harry is the black sheep. He's not going to have any power. He will have no power. The only hope that they can have, and like Harry's the best, like, kind of throwaway royal, like not in the line, because he's like the least embarrassing. He's not the one who's flying around with Jeffrey Epstein and saying that he got his sweat glands shot off in the Falcons. He's not like doing weird pedophilia rings. He's not wearing gollywogs all over the place. And yes, he has a very like checkered past with race, probably because he was raised by a bunch of
I was going to say like
racists.
he has the issues with having worn a Nazi uniform, but his dad wasn't a major in the SS. So
well, and also Harry has shown growth. Like I think the thing about stuff like this is, I feel like he has tried to very publicly show growth for those things. Like he did after wearing the Nazi uniform, have to go do a tour of duty in Afghanistan. So, I still firmly wonder if those things are connected. If she was just like, if grandma was like, look, you're not supposed to remind everybody this family's full of Nazis.
There's a lot of things you can bring up. The Nazi bit is not one of them.
That basically, there was a recent piece that talked about, Wallace Simpson, because there's the one who advocated and stuff, and they talked about how nice and great it was that those two managed to leave very quietly, and it was really great. And you're just
it's like they were made to leave because they were Nazis.
It's like you mean
genuinely.
the Nazis? It's like they were Nazis.
They wanted to install Edward as or his name was David when he abdicated. They wanted to install David Windsor as a Nazi puppet king when the Nazis took over Britain. Like he was all for that. They were huge fans of the Nazis. If I remember correctly, he literally like Wallace Simpson through him passed on classified information to Joachim von Ribbentrop. Like the idea that you would ever make a favorable comparison and be like, oh, why can't you be like Wallace Simpson and David?
Why can't you just try to overthrow us with a fascist dictatorship?
History. 40 years ago, 30 years ago, like people were denying this was true. It's been revealed through fucking, documentary evidence. They even did a thing in The Crown about it, goddamn. Like, watch the fucking Crown. They talk about it.
Yes, they do. You know what's funny? When I was in high school, my French teacher told us a story about Wallace Simpson in this very like, isn't it romantic thing? So like, I initially I sort of knew about the story very vaguely, but like, the only thing I knew about the royal family was really Diana and then Fergie stuff. And then you read the actual story and you're like, yo, this is really not as romantic as y'all are putting it out to be. This is actually real icky and gross. Like, sorry, not romanticizing the Nazis. Just not happening.
Cynthia, I want to definitely do more with you because I haven't watched Coming to America 2 yet. But also, you talking about colorism and relationships in movies. Once again, I implore you to watch Princess and the Frog because I'm really curious about your opinion on basically that entire movie. It's very black centric. It's New Orleans. It's Creole, which I know is not necessarily your background, but I think a
Technically,
lot
my
of,
dad's family is from New Orleans.
Okay, well then you'll probably have a lot. Like it's ambiguous in the time that it takes place, but her father fights in World War I at some point. At least he's in a World War I uniform. So I'm really interested to see how you would, because there were so many parts of that movie where I was just like, oh, this is going to be really bad, and then it wasn't. So I'm interested to see, discussing colorism, and especially with Disney's checkered past, how you would feel about that. So
I definitely want to discuss that, and I do subscribe to Disney Plus now. So
okay, well, definitely watch it. I think you'll like it, but certainly I'm more than happy for you to come at me and be like, "What the fuck? Why would you make me watch this movie?"
Well, I mean, it can't. I'm surely it can't be any worse than Song of the South, the Disney movie. They'll never put on Disney Plus.
Bro, they're finally getting rid of Song of the South at one of the fucking rides. They're like, look, Splash Mountain. Whoa, okay, so Splash Mountain was always kind of Song of the South, but without the Uncle Remus character. Yeah, without the Remus character, but they're reskinning the whole thing to be Princess and the Frog because it's still very Bayou and everything. So they're like, look, we made Song of the South, but less racist and kind of a fairy tale with a princess. Is everybody happy now? Can we forget about how we did that one
Walt
time?
Disney being an insane racist anti-Semite, please.
look, they're probably all like, "Look, yo, we got all this Pixar content, like."
We got Star Wars. Look, we're doing so well now. Don't you love us now? We got rid of Cara Dune for you. Cynthia, thank you so much for coming on. Always a pleasure to have somebody other than our dumbasses talking.
Yeah, thank you so much, and we will talk to you next week.